Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Neha Kumar, an associate professor, Georgia Tech, and currently located in New Delhi, where it's 6:30 p.m., 6:33 now. I was vice president at large in the outgoing SIGCHI Executive Committee, or the EC, and I'm now in the role of president in the incoming EC. And I'm excited to welcome us all to this first meeting with both our outgoing and incoming EC members, as well as members of our community. So thank you all for making the time to be here. So handover meetings in the past have been in-person meetings. I don't know, but I've been told. So 2-3 day long affairs with lots of room to get to know each other and discuss the past, present, and future of SIGCHI. But we live in a new world now, and our handover began almost as soon as election results were announced, and will continue until our open calls are completed. But in the midst of all this, we wanted to take a moment to share with each other and with our community what the EC has been working towards over the past 3 years, and also what our values and vision are as we keep moving forward. So in the first hour today, outgoing members will communicate their accomplishments, their lessons learned, and then we'll hear what the new EC has in store for us for the next few months. And then we'll leave a room for questions and conversation. And Casey Fieser, our outgoing adjunct chair of community engagement, will be moderating today. So if you have questions along the way, you're welcome to put them in the chat window, and one of us will get to them. You can also hold on to them until the slides are all done. And in the final half hour, we will be taking questions. We'll prioritize questions from the new EC members, but we also want to encourage wider conversation. And since we have a long list of speakers, we'll get started and hopefully do our best to stick to our allotted times. Over to Casey.
Hi, thank you. Yes, as Neha said, if you have comments and questions during this first part, since we want to make sure to get through everyone, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and people who have just finished presenting can have a look at the chat to see if there are questions, and then hopefully we will have lots of time at the end for questions as well. But first, we have our outgoing president, Helena.
Okay, so I tried not to summarize like everything that we've done these past 3 years. First of all, because I can't even take the time to sit down and do that. And second of all, it's in a bazillion blog posts, not to mention the town hall videos. And third of all, because you have the EC members doing sort of their own summaries. So when I was asked to give my thoughts, one of the things I did is I went back to the beginning. I went back to 3 years ago and thought about, well, what did we start there and how did that get us to where we are now? So if you go to the next slide, even before we had our first meeting in July 2018, I had sent out a survey to the membership, and I asked people, first of all, to just tell me, what do you want to see the SIGCHI EC tackle? What are some of the issues? And this were some of the grand challenges that came out of that conversation. I took that list to the EC when we had our meeting in July in New York City, July 2018, and we brainstormed a bunch with regards to what are our values and what are our strategic initiatives. And if you go to the next slide, that is sort of what led to the strategic initiatives that the 2018 and 21 SIGCHI EC posted on our blog. So the blog link is at the bottom if you really want to go into these a little bit further. So when I look at these, it was actually quite funny. I had looked at these a few months ago just to see, like, oh yeah, these strategic initiatives. And I see like a lot of what we did, like a vast majority of what we did, not things that we had to respond to in the moment, but there were reasons and thoughts behind what was achieved by the EC. And it started with these strategic initiatives when we met in October of 2018. That was our next EC meeting. We sat down and we broke these strategic initiatives into specific measurable goals, SMART goals for anybody who is well versed in that kind of thinking, strategic, measurable, like attainable, and then I forgot what R&T is. Oh, having a timeline for these things. So the timeline was really the EC. The 2018 to 2021. So for instance, growing our membership to reflect the community. And so actually the funny thing is I would say we got to membership to reflect the community, but it wasn't in the process of growing it per se. So if anybody listened to the town hall slides from Regina, she pointed out that we actually dropped our membership, and this was with the intention of helping the CHI conference continue to maintain low registration prices. For years the CHI conference was paying for membership and for new members to SIGCHI, and that just didn't make sense anymore. And we also ended up with a lot of like one-off membership. So I would say who is listed in the list of members at this point is probably much more reflective of the community, those who actively choose to re-up their membership. But we've also seen a lot of membership changes. So there's been a growth in international membership, which was a strategic initiative, that the folks that want to be engaged in HCI are a more international, not North American focused membership base. And so continuing to encourage that membership was really important in the SIGCHI. A huge part of this one, if you read it on the blog post, is that we wanted to have better communication to folks. And I would say that we're still challenged by that the chat's now going to distract me, sorry. that communication is really difficult because those that consider themselves part of the bigger, larger HCI community are not all members. And thus when we send an email out to SIGCHI-members, we're not getting to all of them. So that is, continue to, I would say, be a strategic initiative to think about what is membership and how do we reach them. Ensuring scalability of our organization and conference was a huge undertaking that started with the prior EC under Lauren and continued into the past 3 years. So much stuff falls under this, continuing to move PCS 2.0. The conference's web app that Ima took from a mobile app to being a web-based app in order to make sure that it works in multiple environments. Ensuring that we continue to support the CHI SC in its workings and growing and being able to manage this behemoth called CHI. Rejigging the council steering committee chairs meetings so that all of our family of conferences can come together and really understand common pain points and how to work together in those regards. Volunteer strain was another one that we were supposed to be looking at, and we tried to address through a volunteer survey under Mark Perry. I don't know if he's going to present on that, but I know he's in the process of writing up a blog post and what we've learned about that. And these are, again, strategic initiatives I think need to continue to move because it makes a big difference in how the organization runs. Enhancing HCI knowledge distribution. So we really pushed the YouTube channel. I want to give a shout out to the videos team and how much work that they did, especially during the pandemic, to make that a pipeline that's just really simple, one click almost. The work that we did on the back end, this goes back to infrastructure with regards to TAPS and all the work that Julie did to make sure that the conferences knew how to use TAPS, everything that continues to transform with regards to the PACM, and then outreach through the ADC, and now the new Latin American committee was a huge part of that is about continuing to do our jobs as a SIGCHI EC to enhance HCI knowledge distribution by holding workshops in summer schools. Promoting inclusivity, if anybody's been paying attention at all these past 3 years, was a huge strategic initiative. And we really did need to do a lot with regards to understanding the needs of our community, figuring out how to inject appropriate accessibility measures throughout our conferences. That's led to Soraya and Stacy being on the EC and their new committee. All the regional outreach that we've been doing, The work that Neha has been doing with the equity talks, a lot of the work with the chapters was focused also on inclusivity, because when we think about our international membership, we're again down to chapters are actually really important outside of North America and Europe, and we continued to cultivate that under the direction of Eunice. And diversity in leadership, which I'll get back to in a second. And then you can see the support local and global. We broke it out as a strategic initiative, but I kept commenting on it throughout all the other initiatives. And I would say that this is still a huge strategic initiative moving forward for the EC. And I'd like to make sure that they're aware of everything we've been doing up until now to be able to support local strength in HCI around the world, and then make sure that that we're facilitating the connections between people around the world who have knowledge that they want to share, and those who want that knowledge as well. Let's continue. I can always answer questions about any of those. So this was the slide that I actually had from my kickoff 3 years ago. And this was what the SIGCHI EC looked like. I made 2 points here. The first point is that there wasn't much of a change. If you look at what the SIGCHI EC was from the 3 years before to this photo page, it was pretty much all of the same people. So the one thing I said is, I don't think that is good and healthy for the community to have the same people leading the community. The other thing that I mentioned is, why are we the ones, as you can see at the top, why are we the ones to solve the problems we identified? And I think it's really important that I was pointing at the fact that we had only one representative outside of North America and Europe on the EC at the time of 2018, July of 2018. The vast majority, pretty much everybody except for that one representative, was white. So I made this, and I think everybody agreed right away that one of the first things we had to do was think about, what does diversity look like in the EC, and to make that a priority, to move people around, that people should not be sitting in the EC. And if you go to the next slide, this is the result. So this is the outgoing EC. This is everybody that was included. We first of all expanded the representation to folks in, we have East Asia, but we also have South America, in addition to Europe and North America. We have LGBTQIA+ represented here. We have a Latinx represented here. I think we were over 50% women at one point as well. Not to mention, we had a dual female leadership team, myself and Julie, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the first time that had happened, when Cliff moved on to chair CHI 2022. And that allowed us to bring in Tess and all of her really amazing experience with equity and publications and name changes from the ACM into SIGCHI. So that just gives you an idea of a motivation that we had with the SIGCHI EC. And if you go to the next one, the key here actually is that it's more than just the EC. So another thing that I really encouraged everybody to think through is that it's not just the people in the room, but we need to do more with regards to committees. Committees, first of all, ensure that we're getting a more diverse set of voices, but also committees led to people learning more about the SIGCHI EC's work and all the work that needs to be done, and then create the pipeline for people to move into the roles for the future. So I think that's actually really important to consider for the future. If you go to the next slide, one of the other challenges, and I put this here because this actually was a slide that I had, was I said, make your mark and plan for the transition in 3 years. 3 years ago, and even more so before that, We didn't write anything down. There was very little written down. There was not a clear understanding of what a lot of these roles were and how they were encompassed, how people connected to the ACM and to the conferences. There's so much that went into ensuring that we don't continue to end up in this position where we have to keep people on the EC because they have knowledge and we can't let it go. I think that is the sign of an unhealthy community and an unhealthy leadership team. And I'm really actually proud of the EC and the way that folks have set it up so that the next EC can come in and we can continue to engage more people. Next slide. So a couple of things that didn't quite get done. Timelines don't always work the way you want. And I've mentioned a bunch of these and I'm just like putting them out there for people to keep in mind. We still have the volunteer articulation and handbook. I want to move that out to get community feedback soon. I'm going to be putting it up on the blog, but also up on Medium, but also out on Discord. We have a data access and collection policy that we've been working on for quite a long time. And that's right now with Casey getting a lot of input through the Research Ethics Committee, as well as some other people. And we're going to continue to work on that and then send it out for community feedback as well. The meeting minutes issue, I believe Christy is now managing this process, and I would hope that Tammy and Christy have had a chance to talk about how they want to move forward with meeting minutes. But this was one of those things that I'm not going to get into a whole he said, she said on this, but this actually goes back to before the past DC. So we start missing meeting minutes from 2017, not even 2018. So this is going to take a really long time to go back in time. And I know for a number of those years, it's because we were just sort of half writing down things at the time. And so the messiness of this process is kind of unfortunate, but I'm not sure the best way to move forward with that process. The EC history page, I want to do a shout out to Lindsay and Roman on the Ops and Comms committee for working on this. It took forever to actually get the EC history and to scrape various information sources to get a halfway decent storyline as to who was on the EC, what committees did we have in the past. Believe it or not, as usual, things were not written down in the past. So we now have a page on the SIGCHI.org website, which we haven't quite put live yet, but I want to get feedback again because I'm sure we missed people. A subcommittee, or no, not subcommittee, a steering committee analysis with Vino. So she did an amazing job going and interviewing 10 of our 24 conferences steering committees and pulling together some information about how those steering committees are formed, who are the people on it, what are the roles there, how do people get on it, how do people get off of it, starting to have a little bit more formalization with these steering committees, because when we think about the future of our community and the volunteering, it's really important for people to understand that volunteering in the steering committee for their favorite conference is a huge part of ensuring that our conferences are supporting our community. The EC committee articulation. So I'm actually going to put out there at our next meeting on as an agenda item that I actually think we should vote on all of these. This is all of the committees articulating just those rules, like what do they do? Who's on it? How many people are on it? How long should they be? I think this is actually something we should be more formalizing and voting on it. And the violations database. I said it's messier than I thought it would be. There are so many questions to answer. And you'll see in the later slides, this is one of the things I'll be taking on. Final things. These are my things to keep in mind. This is, again, Helena's musings. Conferences. I really think it's important for the EC to support general chairs in taking a financial hit for registration prices differential. We supported the CHI conference this past year in doing this. We said, if you take a loss because you end up with a lot of people at a really low registration price, so be it. We want to do this for the community, and I put forward that we should continue to do that. I really think it's important to prioritize addressing the steering committee and the general chair diversity. So this is again why it's really important to articulate how do people get on and get off a steering committee. We still need a way to communicate and guide. We do have the how-to policy, policy implication, or actually for our conferences, they need a how-to guide. So this is one of those things that I didn't actually get to. They don't understand, the conferences really don't understand the policy implications from the ECM and SIGCHI. And then they also, in our last Council of Steering Committee Chairs conference, talked about how do you handle complaints and personalities. Finances, one of our biggest issues is that we don't have a mechanism for better planning out towards an eye towards the future, not just this next year, year and a half, but towards 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, because this is going to make a big difference with open access happening, us losing revenue due to that, and the increasing use of the price differentials with registration. Sustainability, this is one of these things that I really wanted to tackle, but we did not get to it. What I suggest is there is a consultant company, Meet Green, and I think it would be fantastic for us to bring them in to think about what it looks like to consult, to have that consultant for all of our conferences. I'm sure there's other consulting companies, but this was one of those that I learned about a while ago, and I really wanted to bring them in, but haha, pandemic ruins all your plans. Awards, one of the issues, we try very hard to start thinking more about diversity, equity, and inclusion with regards to awards committees and winners. I would say that we need to continue that and also be looking upwards. We need to do a better job of getting SIGCHI people either on ACM level award committees or just being nominated for those awards. Couple ACs I really recognize we need. I'm starting to think more and more we need an AC for data. We've got a lot of surveys, we have a lot of analysis. It's a hard job. Somebody needs to be doing it and actually thinking about going back to that access and that data access guide and policy. So we should be thinking about this. An AC for volunteering, it's continuing to be an issue that I think having somebody who focuses on that, and an AC for mentoring. This is something that keeps coming up over and over again. And I just think, you know, there needs to be somebody who focuses on that. A structure of the EC is the final thing I wanted to talk about. There's been so many issues with, I actually want to go down to the second bullet there. With the structure of the EC, it's an old structure that was based on a very different SIGCHI. SIGGRAPH a number, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, has completely changed their model. And I really think we should take a really good look at what are the other SIGs doing and what is that model. It needs to be more flexible and kinder to folks. And when I say flexible, one of the problems is we cannot be forced into a structure every single, year without some flexibility to respond to the actual needs and changes that are happening. So for instance, having one VP for membership and communication is a huge job. It really needs to be split. We're stuck with that as a structure because of the bylaws. This issue about, for a while there, we had a CHI AC. Maybe that's not the best structure moving forward. That's one of the things that need to be discussed as how do we continue to allow for that flexibility. And the kinder part of it goes back to what SIGGRAPH did. It's just too much for people to be on the SIGCHI EC for 3 years. It ends up actually being a lot of work. And specifically that the person that's in the president role, by the time they're off the EC, they've been on the EC for 9 years. By the time I'm done with past president, I'll have been on the EC for 9 years. That is, number one, too much for one person to do. It's exhausting. It stops that one person from being able to actually volunteer in pretty much any other role. But also that's too much influence, I think, for one person to have. And what, for instance, SIGGRAPH is doing is it is a rotation of 1-year terms for people to move in to the chair position and then move back out. And you're on the EC for like 1 to 2 years before you move into that chair position. So you have some knowledge that you can then lead for a year. So that's just one of the examples that they're having. But I think we need to have an early concerted effort to talk about what the future of the SIGCHI EC looks like. So those are my recommendations for the future EC to think through as I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Any questions that I missed that I really need to answer?
There isn't anything in the chat.
Oh, good. It was either riveting or not of interest at all.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions that would be easy for Helena to address in the chat, please put them there. We can also leave some things until the end. By the way, I noticed that Max is live tweeting if anyone wants to follow along that way as well.
My Twitter account kept telling me that he was live tweeting while I was talking, which is quite interesting to see my points reflected back.
All right, so the next part of our agenda is the largest part of this meeting, which is that outgoing members of the EC are going to speak briefly. I will give two simple instructions. One is please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes, and the second is when you're done speaking, please glance at the chat to see if there's anything there that you can easily address in chat, or also folks are welcome to hold questions until the end. And first up, we have Julie on publications.
Hiya, so I'm Julie Williamson. I started my life in the EC as the Vice President for Publications, and so a lot of my work obviously revolved around that. I mean, the first thing I want to say is that none of this would have been possible without all of the amazing work that every volunteer who engaged with proceedings production in the past 3 years while I've been doing this work. They are the people who've really put in the hours. They've been flexible to these changing processes, and they've put in the work. So that's where the big thanks goes for this role. There were a lot of big changes, big interesting challenges and opportunities that came up while I was doing this role. People will be aware that DL Next, which was the new version of the ACM Digital Library, launched in January 2020, and that was a huge change from the previous platform. It exposed a lot of metadata that had never been visible before, and really prompted a lot of changes in how proceedings were produced, how we produce metadata, and the types of outputs that we needed to be able to produce. We needed to dramatically improve our processes. So it was big changes to proceedings production. Probably the most visible one to most authors would have been the authoring template changes and all of the work that went into trying to make our publications fit the new formats that were required. And also there have been a lot of really major changes in publication policy that have changed as well a lot of our working practices. Some of the biggest kind of achievements of my time in the EC is that now all SIGCHI proceedings produce HTML versions of record. This is a huge step forward. It is something that I'm beyond excited about. I think it's been a long time coming that we move away from archiving PDF and actually produce more dynamic formats, more accessible formats, and just decouple our work, decouple presentation and content in the way that we archive our publications. Part of this change also means that all of the underlying versions of record are preserved in a JATS-BITS archive. Again, this is moving away from archiving PDF, which is not a very flexible format, into this new type of archive, which is certainly the kind of standard and a long time, really late for the ACM to adopt this standard. So it's really good that our publications now are saved in a format that will outlive our lives, certainly. And finally, there's been a lot of work to reconfigure the workflows in publications and proceedings production to support kind of more diverse working practices in TAPS. There's been a huge improvement since the 2019 Word template, which was obviously a really huge issue. And I've been really proud of all the work that we've done to advocate for non-LaTeX authors and kind of more usable processes for the author facing experience. My only outgoing bit of advice is that we definitely need to trust our fellow volunteers. All of this work that I'm talking about, it's not something that one person could ever have done. And actually, trusting the volunteers that we put into places, trusting proceedings chairs, trusting fellow committee members, trusting those around us is going to be super important as we kind of do these jobs that are most certainly bigger and more important than what one person can achieve by themselves.
Great, thank you, Julie. All right, next up, we have Andrew on conferences.
Thanks, Casey. So hello, everyone. I was the interim vice president for conferences since last January, so January 2020, and before that, it was Aaron Quigley who was in that position. So first, I would like to thank Aaron for, I know he's not here today, but I would like to thank him for all the work that he's done, and there was a tremendous amount of work that he's been able to do while on the executive committee. And he's also been greatly helpful to me, so I also would like to thank him for that, because he spent a lot of time talking to me about EC and conferences. So during this year and a half, I think that probably the the central thing that I was able to do was to support conferences during the pandemic. And you know, just like Julie was saying, you know, all of these people who worked on the conferences are obviously the people who made it through the, you know, through these difficult times. But hopefully, you know, the meetings that we had with organizers were something that was helpful in moving this forward. I think, again, looking to the future, I'm very excited about what's going to happen with our online efforts. We've, you know, it was interesting in 2020 January, my first executive committee meeting. One thing that I brought up as something I would like to work on is how do we expand online? And of course, then, you know, the pandemic happened, and we did, in fact, solely focus on online. So I'm looking forward to taking what we've learned and turning that into a powerful new way to connect with a broader audience. And then the one thing that I really, again, going back to my year and a half of experience on the EC, I felt that talking to volunteers directly, talking to organizers directly was one of the most fun parts, but also one of the most effective ways of getting to results. So it's to some extent inefficient, because you really have to be talking to people individually, and that takes a lot of time. But on the other hand, I think that it's a powerful way to connect and to move things forward. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And next we have Eunice on chapters.
Hi everyone, my name is Eunice, and I'm representing as a VP for chapters. So this is actually, I started at EC as the ADC committee. So actually, I just want to acknowledge the work that Helena and Lauren has done, like since early 2018, actually bring diversity into the EC community by starting the ADC Asian Development Committee at the EC. So when I started my role as ADC, I started to get to know a lot of chapters, and also like started to help a lot of community in Asia, especially to study their chapters. And as the community grew in 3 years, like a lot of chapters from Asia was born. I was appointed as the VP for chapters in 2018. And thank you to Tuomo and Helena, who asked me to appointed me for this position. So my vision was actually like I want to create more presence for chapters in the Global South, because a lot of community in Global South, a lot of them, they have not heard about ACM SIGCHI, or they prefer other community or other organization instead of ACM. So that's my main thing that I wanted to focus, during my appointment as the VP for chapters. And also, I also wanted that each of the chapters are not just like a present, but also get connected. And for the last 3 years, we have significantly increased the number of chapters across Global South especially, but it doesn't mean that we neglect the chapters in other places. And for each of the chapters, we have now around 68 chapters around the world, and more than 30% are from Global South. And mostly like there are new chapters that just started like in the last 3 years. And then the other thing that we have done is like with these chapters, like I help them to engage among the chapters. So there is a lot of discussion, a lot of knowledge exchange, and expanding the network. So people who have never been to SIGCHI community, they can develop their network. I'm not sure what's happening now. And yeah, so the chapters also started to have visibility in the global arena, because usually like a chapter just meet once a year, and Tuomo has done a lot of things to provide set up the governance for the chapters, but yeah, and then I continue the good work that Tuomo has done, and by making more connection regularly through the regular office hours that we have, and also through the work as a VP of 4 chapter. I also like work closely with the Asian Development Committee, as well as the group from the Latin America, to grow engagement of the SIGCHI chapters in the global conferences, and then making a publication known in the international level. And the next thing that was important was like through the survey, we learned that chapters struggled with starting out and organized activities. And Helena, Neha, and previous EC members, like we worked together to start the chapter funding to provide support for chapters. And now it's emerged with the development funding, which is good to help a lot of chapters organize so many activities. So what is the biggest achievement is like the increase, not just the numbers, but also engagement and the visibility of chapters at a local and global level. And one of the things that we have done is like we bring chapters one another, like collaborate. For example, through Asian CHI Symposium, we made we had 11 chapters like from Global South actually work together to organize symposium, and a lot of people like publish their work in the ASEAN Digital Library. So my message for the new EC for the VP4 chapters, like never underestimate the power of local chapter, because they can be the engine to expand the presence of ASEAN community at regional and global levels. And what is needed by chapters is something beyond the event-based activities. The growth of network, the research collaboration, the portfolios, and community outreach, and as well as international acknowledgement from the global SIGCHI community are the key aspect to make chapter grow and integrated into the international community. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Next up, we have Regina on comms.
Well, it looked like, at least on the photos from Helena, that I was one of the few ones surviving from the beginning to the end, but of course that's not true. When I started, we had big plans. At the time in 2018, we had a beautifully restructured website, and then also was still trying to convince the company to make some feature changes to make it better. And Regina is known to be the typically emergency handler. So when suddenly 2 general chairs for a CHI conference that never happened disappeared, I was stepping in as general chair. So after 4 months, I left the EC And Pageman was taking over. So I really have to thank Pageman of bringing on, I don't know how many followers, setting up an enormous amount of tweets and growing the community there, reaching out. And when I came back about 8-9 months ago, what was changed was not only the publication channels, but in the end, the whole team. So Regina, as you see on the left-hand side, was enjoying her time in Hawaii with Floyd, running a conference that never happened in the end. And I wanted to say thank you to Lindsay, Simone, Kata, of course, Stefan, Ella, and Paula, and for running all these communication efforts that we have seen growing on social media, and of course, very likely in the future on other types of social media. The question for the future is, where do we go next? Because as you see up there, more to the right corner, this is the things most of the people I've been listening to in the past are talking about. But if you look a bit down, we see there are lots of other channels in other parts of the world where we could engage. And it's very, very difficult to select what is the right one. We know in Asia, Instagram would be more important than other things. So which channels should we open up? Is it really something that is reasonable if you are using things like Discord and the majority of members that might be a bit different in their technology approach are not using these kind of things anymore? So what's the question to go forward? And my advice for the next EC is a very simple one, and I have been always sticking to it, which is I truly believe not bigger is better, but better is better. It's not about the more channel, but it's about the better communication that I think is important to do. And with this kind of motto, I thank everyone for being with me on these kind of things. And I think it's a reasonable, nice stage to end my volunteering career for SIGCHI.
Thank you, Regina. Next up, we have Anuruha on finances.
Hi, guys. Sorry, I had to drop out for a second because Zoom crashed on me. So I hope you guys can still hear me. Yep. Okay, good. Okay, so my name is Aniruddha Joshi. I am the VP Finance. I originally joined the Asian Development Committee with a keen interest to grow the HCI community in Asia, in India specifically, where I do most of my work. And a few months later, somewhere in 2017, I was asked by the then EC to join as VP Finance for the term that remained, about a year and a half, about almost 2 years. And then I decided to run for VP Finance that year, and here I am now handing over. Right. So when I joined the EC, and specifically in my second term, one of the big challenge that we were facing as the EC and as the SIGCHI community is that on the one hand, a lot of people found many of our conferences to be quite expensive, many of our events to be expensive. And on the other hand, although we were trying to make zero budgets, I mean, so budgets that met and not really try to make a profit, but inevitably because project budgets probably did not spend out completely, or for several other reasons that I have written in a blog a couple of years ago, we ended up with a slightly higher balance than we had last year. And this was happening consistently year over year. So one of the things that I, along with Dan, from whom I took over, we decided to focus on was to kind of move to more trackable project budgets so that we could plan our budgets better going forward. And I'm happy to report that actually this is something that we could do with the help of ACM quite successfully. So that was, I would say, one of the important achievements. Probably most people don't care about that outside the EC or outside the finance domain, but I believe it will have an impact on everyone, every EC member, every committee member that EC has set up, and every member of SIGCHI, and even people who are not members of SIGCHI but are part of our HCI community. I think it will make a big impact because it will give us all the money that we have and it will allow us to optimally use it. The second half of the term was about surviving COVID, and thanks to almost everybody again within the community, but especially to the people who ran conferences in this period. They kind of swung around to make virtual conferences, break even, worked out new budgets all over again, and did a lot more work than they had signed up for doing. And also thanks to Andrew for leading that effort along with other conferences. We've sort of survived and actually have not had a bad year, financially speaking, that we are ending up with. Okay. Fun, of course. So I actually also am very thankful to all the wide variety of people that I learned from in the last 4, 5, 6 years that I've been on the EC. So that's been lovely. And I really learned and absorbed a lot from all of them. Times were not always, news were not always positive, let me put it this way, and how different people handle them and how do we manage the situations is something that I kind of take away from as an experience from this EC. Okay, so I believe that there is a big challenge and a big opportunity in front of the EC that is coming up, and perhaps the opportunity might continue and spill over even beyond this EC, which is, so we went in the last 1.5 years from in-person to virtual events, and we were all uncertain about how things might pan out. Thankfully, things turned out to be easier financially, not work-wise. Work turned out to be a lot more, but in terms of finances, things turned out to be reasonably good, better than what I had expected at the start of the pandemic anyway. So thankfully. However, one of the things that is uncertain as of now is when we go back from virtual to hybrid or in person, the expenses could mount substantially and income may not rise up to that. And in addition to that, we have many other challenges coming up like open access and demands for cutting down on the budget and or on the cost of the attending events and so on, which could start denting our finances in the next few years. And so we have to, so that's a big challenge, I think, and we need to be able to plan for that. And I believe that this is going to be the EC that is going to actually do most of the planning for that particular eventuality. The other, on the other hand, so this kind of brings me back to my original motivations for joining as a volunteer in the SIGCHI effort, which is that SIGCHI currently reaches only about 1.3 billion of about 7.8 billion people in the world, which is roughly about 17% of the population. As we sponsor conferences that mainly run in developed countries. Over the last 30 years or so of SIGCHI's existence, and in my estimate, about 300 conferences, only 2 conferences have been sponsored to run in countries which are not developed countries. And I think this, I see this as a huge opportunity because we have that much to grow, that many more people to reach out to, those many more problems to sort of solve. So, so I kind of, the words that I would say to the incoming EC closing thoughts is that it's the H in the SIGCHI that sets us apart. It's the human. And while we have done well to do many, many things, chapters, for example, has been a wonderful success in the last 3 years. The community support that we have been providing through awards such as Gary Marsden and student scholarships, and also the summer schools has been also fabulous. But I do believe that we need to actually also go beyond these and take our main activities, which are our conferences, in to developing countries. Right now, we are kind of going to only a small part of the human community, and we can actually look forward to going to bigger ones. So that's my closing thought.
Thank you, Anuruha. Next up, we have Shaolin on inclusion and cares.
Thank you, Casey. Hi, I'm Shaolin Barzel, VP at Large from the EC, on the EC from 2019 to 2021. I'm also a professor at Penn State College of Information Sciences and Technology. Most of my work on the EC for the past 2 years has been about promoting diversity and equity, in addition to help organize and participate in listening and community outreach events like Ask Me Anything sessions and equity talks. With the help of a group of very committed volunteers, many of them are in the audience today, we established SIGCHI Cares in January 2020, an advocacy group for those who experience discrimination and or harassment at our professional events. We offer direct support for those affected, providing open and confidential conversations and helping them navigate best ways forward. I stepped down as the chair of this committee at the end of June to focus on my new EVP responsibility. And the new leadership for CARES is Celine Latulip and Michael Mueller. In addition, I also work with 6 inclusion teams these past 2 years. The volunteers on these teams contributed significantly to the development of EC's D&I survey, and we are all very grateful for their work. Looking ahead, we will need to continue to develop concrete support for victims of harassment and discrimination. This is especially important because not all victims choose to file official complaints with ACM. To raise awareness, more regular outreach events are necessary to not only tell people what CARES does, but also learn from the community what they wish that we would do. There have been many questions since the rollout of the ACM violation database in April. I also see the need for CARES and EC to work very closely with the community and the new ACM Committee on Violation Disclosure to address issues related to access control and the amount of information to be disclosed to those who query the database, among other things. For me, equity and D&I is fundamentally a question of respect for human dignity and deserves highest standards of our accountability. We need to improve our collective understanding of what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and how to develop and implement best practices in a complex, evolving workflow undertaken mostly by our volunteers. We are in this together. That's what I often like to say. So let's build partnership among different organizations, groups, and stakeholders together. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelwyn. Next, we have Neha on community support.
Hi, everybody. So Neha Kumar, I was VP at large in the previous term, also for 2 years, like Shelwyn. And in this role, I was really fortunate to work with an amazing group of volunteers. So Adriana Vivacqua, Luigi De Rusis, Navina Carosella, Vikram Kamath, and Lauren Terveen were on the SIGCHI Development Fund Committee. And then we had a group of advisors. So Sane Gaitan, Pushpendra Singh, Zhengji Liu, Kaveh Bazargan, and Susan Ray. And together, we worked on a bunch of different projects, different initiatives, with a lot of support from Helena, from Aniruddha. Just having the support of the whole EC was amazing to work on revising and managing the SIGCHI Development Fund, the Gary Marsden Travel Awards, also trying to lead the effort for the SIGCHI Latin America Committee, which then Adriana took on and she will talk about. And then we tried to put together some calendars. So in a virtual world, how we could do more in terms of just connecting people. And I think that there's some work to be done there. The Voices of SIGCHI Medium publication was really an effort to bring together voices from different parts of the world, just to get a sense of how diverse, how rich we really are. And then the Equity Talks project, which I worked on with a bunch of other folks on the EC. With Shelwyn, with the ACs for Equity, the ACs for Sustainability, and with Tess Tannenbaum, VP Pubs. So what did we learn? Well, a few different things. And since Adriana was on the the committee and is now going to be taking these on. That transfer has been a little more seamless, but certainly we've learned that we could use the SIGCHI Development Fund a lot more strategically, and that's something that we can think about more. It's certainly undersubscribed at present, and we want to do more with it. We want to integrate the travel awards into conference programs a little better so that conferences know that this is something they can count on. The regional committees, we're looking at how we work with these committees and how they basically stitch together the chapters and the global EC. And then the calendars, as I mentioned, there's certainly room to have more entries in the calendars, but also how do they get used by conferences. And then with regards to the Voices of SIGCHI, I think there's a lot more to be done to really bring greater visibility into the local and global, and that's something we will be focusing on, and we'll talk about it a bit. And then more effective reporting out from the EC, just of things that we've been doing. And through the equity talks, if there's one thing we've learned, then it's that we can do a lot more when we have the community engaged. In terms of advice, I would say I had first written what is going to be the advice of the folks that go after me. So I changed that to say that we can really do a lot when we're open to experimenting around different types of volunteering roles. I think this is something that Helena also alluded to. But what we found was having an advisory group was actually really, really instrumental in terms of just the types of things that we were able to do, that we were able to think of doing with the mechanisms that we used. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. All right, next we have Adriana and Vino on equity.
Hi, I'm Vinoba Vinayagamurthy, and like Casey just said, I am a AC for Equity with Adriana Vivakwa. We started with the SIGCHI EC autumn last year, or the early start of autumn last year, and until the present. It wasn't a role that was there before, and there's no committees. We were essentially recruited through an open call, and I think we kind of brought a different sense of diversity to the panel as well. So Adriana comes from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and I come from the BBC in London with a heritage from Sri Lanka, lived in Nigeria. So I think open calls are a brilliant way of getting people involved in these committees, and thanks to Helena, we were able to do that. We didn't have a specific principle as such, other than we wanted to make sure that there was a sense of equity across the whole of SIGCHI. And we wanted to try and see if there were ways of improving representation from minority groups. But of course, we only started in autumn last year, so that whole piece of work is still in progress. Fun things that we did, and we'll start with the formation of the SIGCHI Latin American Committee, which was started under a SDF grant. Adriana knows more about this, so I'm going to invite her to come along and say something. Adriana, don't leave me hanging here.
I'm sorry, here I am. I was muted. Okay, so the SIGCHI Latin America Committee was started under the Development Fund during my tenure there. I'm still there, so. And we still work in tandem with the fund, so we sort of report back and talk to each other to see what types of things we can do. And after a lengthy process, I think, of listening to the community, the Latin American community, what they wanted, what they needed, what the challenges they perceived, and how we could best work with the community, we ended up with recruiting a group of 12 amazing people, some of whom are here in the audience, and who really care about further developing the region and building ties and increasing interaction between Latin American groups and local groups and SIGCHI, the community at large. So that's, I'll leave it at that. And if Vino wants to wrap it up.
The other thing that we managed to do was to try and figure out how our 24 conferences across SIGCHI put together steering committees, what they do, and how they go about doing it. So that process involved sort of sending out an invitation out when Andrew called in one of the council meetings of steering committees. over half of the conferences responded, and we ended up interviewing about 10 of them through a sort of our process of sitting down there and talking through the principles of the community they are serving, the history of the community, how people come to volunteer, and what kind of guidelines they have to figure out where the conferences go and who they invite or bring into the steering group itself. And the idea was to try and see if we could come up with some common good to do the kind of things, and things that were also challenges that people were facing. So for instance, everyone wanted to bring in diverse growth in the community, but there were some apprehension about how you go about doing it and how do you overcome certain challenges that are very practical. So these are the sort of things we were trying to tease out. That piece of work is still in progress. Together with Helena, I hope that we can get out a couple of documents to help with that kind of what to do in the future kind of thing, and also to put a set of good practices, so to speak. The third thing that we've been doing has been a little bit more ubiquitous and kind of intangible. It's sort of sitting and having a chat with a lot of people, a lot of different types of people within the SIGCHI community. So with Neha, we've been involved in running and working across the equity talks. There have been a lot of chats with a few chapters, especially in Africa, since I grew up in Nigeria and I have a personal interest there, and a few other sort of conversations that have been going through it. And I think these have also been quite fun, just to be able to reach out and talk to different members. Future opportunities and challenges. Well, equity should really be in everything that we do. So much like accessibility and sustainability, it shouldn't be relegated to a sort of sect of your piece of work. It should be across all forms. And so we should be thinking about new forms of engagement and novel ways of building communities. And that, I think, needs to be put through to some, sustainable processes across all the conferences, so that we are able to build it into all the different layers we have. And I think, the best way to do that for the future is really to listen to what people have to say, update the types of communication channels we have, less of a lecture and more of a two-way communication street. There's a lot to be learned. We don't know much, and we really should be open to learning as much as we can on those front. And that's pretty much it from Adriana and myself.
Thank you, Vina and Adriana. All right, next up we have Soraya and Stacy on accessibility.
Hi, I am Soraya Pritch. I got in the SIGCHI EC in September of last year with Avino and Adriana and Casey. We came in together. This was a really great opportunity to me, and having partnership with Stacy was like the best thing that I can say that happens to me this year. Sorry if I cry in the middle. I'm stepping out, and Stacy is still, wow, is still in the AC for accessibility. It was great to me to have someone who I could talk to about accessibility and make decisions together. So this was really important to me. We had along this year a set of goals, 4 goals, that was increase accessibility, responsiveness, and transparency for SIGCHI members, connect SIGCHI volunteers to accessibility resources, track global accessibility barriers and opportunities for the SIGCHI EC, and advocate for lasting accessibility change within SIGCHI and ACM. We started to having this goal in mind, and our activities were accomplished around these goals. So we had something more structured. We had a couple of months, like hard months to come up with these ideas, but since we got there, it was really great for us to follow a path. So we did many things such as publish blog posts and participate in the AMA, co-organize the Equity Talk #2 on accessibility, participate in the town hall video. So this was the funnest moment to me, most because I could speak in Portuguese, so I was really happy to do that. And I felt an openness of the EC for me to do it. So in many moments, I felt that our ideas were great to them. I mean, everybody was already working on this before we came in. For example, Ayman and his operation team, Cash, who is here, helped us many times. And Julie, who always thought about accessibility in the publication. So many people who already were in the EC were already cared about accessibility, and this is really important. For future opportunities and challenges, we see we need to shift from short-term accessibility thinking to long-term planning and assessment, because when we got in, we were kind of lost. We didn't know what to do. Helena was right when she said that in the beginning, that we were trying to read all policies and everything, but once everybody gave us support, this was easier for us to do our work. A word of advice, accessibility is in everything we do, because it's like a transversal team around all VPs and everything. Everybody works in the EC. Thank you very much, everybody. I really loved to know you, and I hope sometime I meet you in person. Lots of hugs.
Thank you, Soraya. All right, next up we have Gloria on awards.
So hi, everybody. I'm Gloria Mark, and I had the great pleasure of serving as the AC for awards. I'd like to start off by giving thanks, big thanks to the awards subcommittee chairs. So they serve a 3-year term like myself, and the top row are people who are currently serving. The bottom row are people who were in the previous terms. So a big shout out to Pat Boud, Ashleisha Palin, Nicholas Elmquist, Michelle Baudouin-Lafont, Elizabeth Churchill, Batya Friedman, Kia Hook, and Jonathan Lazar. But I also want to mention that there's a huge group of people behind these subcommittee chairs, and these are the people who serve on the committees. And they do a lot of work, and I especially want to give a shout out to the people on the Outstanding Dissertation Committee who actually read many dissertations. So please, let's give them a huge, huge thanks. Let's give everybody thanks. So in my term, we gave out 49 awards. This was to people in 13 countries, 5 continents. But being awards chair is not just managing the process, but it's also figuring out who might be overdue, long overdue for awards, and looking around and looking through various conferences and seeing who's been in the community, who's done leadership, who's done great research and practice for sometimes decades and is not being recognized. So, it's figuring out who those people are and getting them nominated. So this last year, we streamlined submissions. We used the submittable system. And that was not the only reason, but we did have a record number of nominations in 2021. So that's really great news. The big challenge for this last term, of course, was COVID. And the challenge was designing and implementing a virtual banquet for both the 2020 and 2021 winners. I think it worked well, but it was a tremendous amount of work. The big reward for serving as chair is people's reactions when they get awards, their appreciation, being able to recognize people for their hard work, for their leadership is just such a tremendous award. In moving forward, we need to think about getting a better gender balance. It's about 60-40, about 60% male, but we can do better, getting a better international balance, and also continuing to seek out overlooked people who are due for awards, because it tends to be maybe popular people who might be nominated, but some people who are very deserving of awards may not be the ones that are getting nominated. So making sure that we are casting a wider net for nominations. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me to serve as your awards chair.
Thank you, Gloria. All right, next up we have David on ops.
Hi there. So I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. I'm David Carger, and I've been the ops chair for just a few months. I sort of started as a lame duck, replacing Eamon Sharma, who has been running ops for several years, but had to drop off to take over his chairing of SIGCHI. Ops is responsible for managing the operation of the various pieces of infrastructure that help CHI do what it does. We manage mailing lists and blogging accounts and survey accounts, Zoom accounts, and so on and so forth. We're also responsible for developing and managing the conference infrastructure, things like PCS, where you submit your work to conferences, Koala, which is a new tool that Eamon led the development of to help conference chairs schedule conference programs, and the CHI Conference Program app, which many of you have used in a variety of CHI conferences to see what's being presented when. The ops team is also responsible for interfacing with the video team under Kashyap Todi and Carla Grigio, who do video management, submission of videos, captioning, think about accessibility. This VC ops position has not yet been filled, and so I'm going to be continuing on for the short term to keep things going with a lot of support from Eamon. A particular thing which I will be continuing to work on and hope to interface with the new EC on is something which was sort of a vision that Eamon and I shared of trying to make the data that's being managed by ops, conference data, programs, attendance reviewing, and so forth, a resource that can be made available under the appropriate policies to researchers in our own community. The use of conference infrastructure to support conferences is an HCI issue. And we think that the researchers in the community can gain better understanding of it and can improve it if they have access. So we're working on data access APIs and policies to support research and innovation in conference software and management, to support things like analyzing attendance and paper selection to understand evolving communities, to analyze reviewing perhaps in order to improve the quality and efficiency of reviewing, and also looking at deploying new tools to enhance community and communication. And so that's where I'm going to be focusing my attention for the remainder of the time that I have here. And I look forward to hearing from you and talking to you about it.
Thank you, David. So Christy, I think we have a slide from Monica that might not be showing up. You might need to reload the slide deck. It should be before some of these, but you might need to reload it. But Monica, do you want to speak on volunteer development, and we'll see if we can get your slide up?
Yeah, definitely. Shall I wait for the slide or shall I just start?
Just a moment.
Sure.
Sorry, I think I've got that separately. One moment, let me.
It was added, Christy. It is in the deck, but I think you need to reload it.
Okay, all right. One moment, sorry.
I was really excited to talk about it.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I found it and I am
Yay.
up now. Yes, I apologize.
That's all right.
There we are. Let's see.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
so thank you for that. So hi, my name is Monica Pereira. I'm here in place of Mark Perry, who could not be here today. And yeah, so I'm the deputy to the adjunct chair, which is Mark Perry, for the Volunteer Development Committee. And this is our team, who comprised of Heloisa Candello, George Raptis, Sierra Bine, and Stanislava. They've all really contributed really nicely, and we've actually made long-term friendships from this. And yeah, we all had the same aim, was to improve volunteering experience and to improve or kind of explore potential barriers and how we can improve the volunteering experience at SIGCHI. We did three major things. The first one was to distribute a survey to the community to find out what issues they are experiencing in volunteering and obtain kind of qualitative information on how we can improve. And key things that were highlighted in that were, were a lack of recognition. Volunteers felt that they didn't get that much recognition, and they felt but underappreciated. There were other things, I'm not going to go into it, which you can look at the blog. Mark Perry's writing up a blog, so you can look at the blog if you want more of the results. But on the flip side is that people do worry about their performance, so kind of feedback would be good to volunteers. But anyway, the second thing that we did was conduct an interview study with the aim of gaining information from senior volunteers in the community, where we asked we conducted a thematic analysis on questions relating to selection criteria for volunteers, recruitment challenges, and tools used to manage volunteers. Again, those results will be in the blog that Mark Perry is in the process of developing. But kind of future work that these would kind of help for developing the volunteer experience would be to develop a volunteer website where volunteers are able to have a profile where they can search up roles, because a lot of volunteers didn't know which roles were available for them to apply for. And so we started on a wireframe prototype. Actually, I think we did about 5 or 6 iterations, and the results and how the iterations were based on the survey results, and so it was kind of evidence-based, and we conducted a heuristic evaluation. And so whoever's moving to the next kind of year, if there's going to be this committee, which I'm sure there is, or hopefully there is, we can pass that wireframe on, because what we wanted to do was roll out the prototype. So what we wanted to do was roll out the prototype so that we can kind of, so that volunteers can have a more engaged experience. There was a few other things that we wanted to do, which was capture the volunteer trajectory from early career to seniority. And then, of course, with COVID, we wanted to do a booth at CHI and at other conferences, but we couldn't, obviously, virtual conferences. Because of COVID, and we wanted to do short training videos for new roles, because a lot of volunteers had noted that they did not know anything about a role So if they were able to watch those videos, then they would just be more informed, and actually management would not have to kind of, not support, because support's always great, but, it would take the weight off, basically. We did face, obviously, the challenge of COVID, because people changed their priorities, there were lack of resources, and we did have a number of volunteer losses. But yes, that was me trying to be really brief and quick. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I've had an amazing time, and I really do look forward to continuing in any capacity within SIGCHI, which I'm currently helping Cliff and Simone out at CHI 2022, and it's so far been a great experience. But thank you. That's me. That's the end. Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. So Lauren wasn't able to be here, but I would like to give a moment to Tess Tannenbaum to talk a bit about publications.
Hi, yeah, so much like David, I also came in during a kind of lame duck period. I started in January to step into the role that Julie was vacating, to move on to the executive vice presidency. And when I came on to the position of VP of Pubs, I did so knowing that there was no way that I was going to have time to even begin orienting myself to what Julie had been doing in the role previously. It was just too daunting of a task. And the reason I was brought in was because I had been doing a significant amount of advocacy and policy development at the ACM level around inclusive policies and publishing, focusing specifically on author name changes. Working together with other SIGCHI community members, ZToops and Kata Spiel, we drafted what would become the first trans-inclusive name change policy to be adopted by any major publisher, and sort of helped ACM sort of break ground in this space. In the process, I got a kind of eye-opening look at how the sausage is made at ACM and sort of how things are handled at the sort of mothership level of our organization. And when it became clear that I was going to have to continue doing that work, that I was going to stay on the implementation committee, I was really grateful to be approached by Helena and Julie and offered a chance to do so from within the SIGCHI executive committee and the support that provided. Since joining the executive, I've continued to advocate for inclusive policies in publishing, but I've also been participating in the planning of the equity talks with Neha, which has been an extraordinarily enjoyable and gratifying experience, getting to engage in conversations with our community about equity issues is something that has been increasingly important to me. I've also been very active in SIGCHI Cares and have been sort of given the opportunity to see a lot of the challenges that we struggle with as a community and a lot of the areas where we still need to grow. And so I guess thinking about the future and thinking about sort of what I would advise the next person stepping into this role, I'd say that understanding how power operates in our institutions is really important. Understanding who has the power, understanding the ways in which power flows, understanding how you can apply leverage to power. To get things done with the ACM, you often have to go outside of our community entirely. To affect change, I had to go and start a working group and start working with the Committee of Publication Ethics and actually do work within the publishing world at a much larger scale in order to get sufficient consensus from the publishing community to make the changes that I wanted to make here. And so thinking about the role that our community plays within a more global sort of space of knowledge production is really important, because there are people in roles like ours across so many different communities and disciplines who are struggling with the same things that we're struggling with, especially when it comes to equity and inclusion issues. And the more that we can support each other across disciplines, the more power we have to build the kinds of consensuses within our communities that allow us to then push for the changes that we want to see. And so I think that is my big takeaway from the last 6 months.
Wonderful, thank you, Tess. So I think next up is actually me, and I will actually cede most of my time in the favor of having more time for community engagement via Q&A at the end. But I'll just say that I am very confident that the new EC is going to be continuing a lot of community facing things like meetings like this, as well as things like blog posts and the AMAs and the equity talks. And I also look forward to seeing the community continuing to engage back with the EC. A little bit speaking to the choir here, the types of people who are here at this meeting, as well as people who are engaging in new communication channels like Discord and whatever comes next. Also, as Helena mentioned, I'm doing some advising on policy related issues, and one of the reasons for that is my new role as the chair of the SIGCHI Research Ethics Committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that either during the Q&A later in the chat or offline. All right, so that's me. And then next up we have Mikhail on interactions.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I just want to say a couple of words about interactions. So I'm one of the co-editors-in-chief together with Daniela Rosner and Alex Taylor. And we have had this position now for, I think, roughly 1.5 years. And we really try to work on the orientation of interactions. And I think that we've already heard today how everybody is talking about equity and inclusion. And I think we're continuing on that. So we have tried to work with having a broader audience, more voices, multiple voices coming in. We have introduced some new formats, for instance, the dialogues, which we're trying to run, where we have multiple authors coming in, having a dialogue in the print version of the magazine. We have also expanded on the online version, so we have lots of blog posts, especially during the pandemic. We have had lots and lots of really interesting articles coming out in the online version of interactions. We have also tried to have multiple languages, so we experimented a little bit with having articles both in Portuguese and English, for instance. And we really try to work on different issues that we think are broad topics for the whole community. So we really want interactions to be a magazine for the whole community to serve us all. So for instance, so when we started this job, we right away faced the pandemic. So we thought that we really wanted a theme issue for the pandemic. To sort of highlight things of importance for us in our community. And it was actually really challenging to have a theme issue at that time, whereas now, I think that was sort of setting a new standard for interactions to have different themes. So after that, we've had different themes, so translations, feminism, activism, disabilities. We just had the tech labor issue, which will come out, I think, right now. And then we have another one on racial justice. We will have one on design democracy coming out around Christmas and so on. And also in the beginning of next year, we have new issues coming out on climate, care, and surveillance and so on. So we really try to be broad and not just be a magazine maybe for one subcommittee or something like that. Also, we get lots of questions if we're a peer-reviewed journal, and I think it's important to say that we're not a scientific journal. We're something in between, a magazine that also should be available to people outside the academic community. And we have lots of readers from industry, for instance, but we do editorial reviews of the papers, and we also have a great set of forum editors doing sort of editorial reviews of the articles we receive. I think it's great fun. I think the magazine is very, very important for our community, and we try to be very open to the feedback that we have received also. So we just had a reader survey out, and we're also trying to sort of adjust the way forward in relation to the feedback we have received.
Great, thank you. All right, next up, I think that Christy is going to say a few words.
Very few. I am working as the SIGCHI project manager. That was a role that was established in 2019. And I'm really grateful to have had this opportunity to work with the past EC and look very much forward to working with the future EC in learning and growing this role even more. It's basically a role that's been developed as we've gone along. I don't think any of us knew exactly all the places that I'd be supporting, and it's just been a fun journey. So in terms of the upsides and the excitement and the fun, I've had a really good time digging in and trying to figure out you know, how to best serve and work with this amazing group of volunteers that you all are. And then we one of the highlights for me of this past EC's term was visiting Munich and being in Munich with the EC for one of our last in-person meetings, which was wonderful. And then looking towards the future, I just look forward again to transitioning and being able to even grow this role more and to bring in a little bit of the institutional knowledge that I'm starting to learn. There's so much to learn. And then just growing and changing and kind of evolving with everyone. And I think my parting words or my parting wisdom at this point are the only thing constant is change. And I think that we all know that both in our careers and our world, and then certainly in a situation where the community is driving a lot of what the focuses are of the EC. And I really admire the fact that everyone's been able to not only stay with their core values and their core focuses, but also to continue to change and understand and address the new needs. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And I believe, do we also have Sade?
Yep, I'm here. Hey everyone, I am Sade Rodriguez. I am the point of contact at ACM for the SIGCHI EC and the SIGCHI sponsored conferences. So I'm here to really just support the SIGCHI community with all your activities related to the SIG and the conference, as well as any type of project or goals you're trying to achieve. So I'm also here to help you navigate the policies and procedures, as I know as a new EC member, it could be a little overwhelming at first, but I'm here to support you and help you with any questions you have, and just really help to provide guidance and recommendations on the steps to take to accomplish those goals. So, you know, I'm excited to get to know everyone and to meet you maybe in person one day, who knows. But, you know, please feel free to reach out to me if you want to schedule a call to discuss or just even to meet and get to know each other. I'm available. So nice to meet everyone.
Thank you. So that concludes the outgoing EC's comments. Again, I hope we will have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, or you can put any questions or comments in the chat now. But now we have some comments as well from the new members of the EC and people in new positions, starting with Neha and Sheldon.
Thank you so much, Casey. The next few slides that you'll see have been put together by the newly elected members, and their names are here on the slide. We're also missing a few of these folks, but I just wanted to say that our term actually started on July 1st, but I don't think it could have really started until we had heard everything that we did over the past hour and a half. So just very, very, very grateful that we had a chance to hear from all of you and all the things that you've been doing in your voices and not in writing for a change. And so that's been wonderful. So that's what SIGCHI's path has looked like thus far. And we now look to the future, the road ahead. And I want to ask Shawen Barzel, our Executive VP, to also share her thoughts.
Thank you, Neha. I very much look forward to working together as a team on the EC and us, and also with a large and growing body of volunteers who have been supporting us all this time. So our EC is still small. We have 6 newly elected members. Actually, Christy, can you go back to the previous slide so people can see the name? The previous slide.
And I guess with these slides, it might be easier to just say next when the next slide is up. So I'll try to remember that.
Great, that's the one. Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying, so our EC is still small. We have 6 newly elected members, past president, and then Stacy Branham and Regan Mandray, who will continue in their adjunct chair positions for accessibility and for CHI, respectively. Regan and Stacy are on vacation, and Helena is right now at an ACM meeting, so they cannot be here. But the rest of us are here. We very much hope and plan for this to be a journey that we are all in together, supporting each other in our goals and along with the SIGCHI community. Now I will give this back to Neha.
Next, please.
Yeah, next, please.
In getting started, we were keen to build on the visions and foundations that have been set by others before us, including the former EC. And the mission of the ACM SIGCHI, if you've been on our website, is as follows: to support the professional growth of its members who are interested in how people interact with technologies and how technology changes society. And if we're to take the people first approach that we aspire to take, then we have to first ask who our SIGCHI members are. And we could think about these members as those who pay ACM on an annual basis for SIGCHI membership, but our community, as we've heard, is really much, much larger. So next slide. We view it as including all those who give their time to SIGCHI, whether it's through reviewing, through various kinds of volunteering, and also partake of services that we provide. Next. This means researchers, educators, designers, practitioners, students, early careers, retired members, industry, academia, nonprofits, those from the global south, from the north, and many others who were missing, even as we try to be inclusive. Next. So the way that we see it, our mission is to ensure that members of this vast SIGCHI community can participate, are informed of avenues to participate, are supported in participating, and derive value from it. Over to Shawan.
Great. These are changing times, and even as we try to build on the infrastructures that already exist, we know that we need to be responsive to the changes that are coming. That will be one significant responsibility on all our shoulders as we take on this charge. We will also be making sure to work in tandem with each other across EC roles and remits to add depth and breadth and strengthen earlier contributions. We'd like to now introduce you to our newly elected members. Our 2 VPs at large will be working on strengthening the presence of SIGCHI as a global institution. I'll now turn the floor to Adriana and Naomi. Next.
Adriana?
As usual. Thank you, Neha and Shawan. I'm Adriana Vivacqua. For those who don't know me, I'm a professor at the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I'm VP at large. I'm the new VP at large at SIGCHI EC, and I'll be working, hopefully, and nurturing local structures and practices, helping local communities develop, building connections, strengthening the connections between local and regional communities and SIGCHI community at large, and bringing these closer, showcasing global research, this with the help of the SDF committee, and probably some new people will have to bring in. With the education task force that was run under Helena, I think, prior, We'll be trying to support HCI education worldwide, looking at what that looks like, be it shared materials, locally relevant materials and practices and knowledge, and weighing, what types of educational opportunity, can we offer, whatever that we do to the community. And also reflecting and
I think we might have lost Adriana.
She's, yes, frozen.
Do we want to move on and then come back to her?
Yeah, why not?
I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Oh, never mind. Welcome back.
Good.
I apologize for that. My network just failed. But I'm right at the end. Then what we want to do is also expand on virtual hybrid offerings, and that mainly means reflecting on and improving our virtual experience, maybe designing new hybrid experiences in tandem with incoming VP conferences, finance. This is something that sort of permeates a lot of what we do. Local and regional chapters and committees, VP chapters as well, and whoever comes on to work on sustainability. I think Helena mentioned a consultant. We'll see how that goes. And maybe this will mean a new hybrid task force. We'll see how that shapes up. So thank you, and I apologize for dropping out. Next.
Hello, I'm Naomi Yamashita from NTT Research Labs in Japan. I'm so honored to serve as a VP at large, although at the same time, I'm still very puzzled why I was elected. Well, joining the EC is something entirely new to me, so my goal might sound a bit vague at this point, but I hope to flesh them out as I work ahead. So now, together with Adriana, I will work on promoting the global presence of SIGCHI, but probably taking a little different approach. So first, I will identify institutional barriers to participation. Well, as an industry researcher based in Asia, I'm facing a lot of barriers myself. For example, like industrial researchers often face difficulties doing volunteer work. And also from my experience when chairing events in Japan, I found it quite painful to satisfy the requirements bounded by ACM business rules or policies, such as holding contracts with the local vendors, because ACM tends to apply the policies uniformly as opposed to the diverse local practices. Now, after identifying such barriers, I would like to work on alleviating them. So, well, I believe some of the barriers may be resolved by reimagining relationships between institutions, and others may be alleviated by building partnerships. So working with Tammy and others, I'd like to build partnerships with other institutions and develop a win-win relationship. As another approach to alleviate the institutional barriers, I would like to consider supporting global infrastructures. One idea which I always wished to implement is to provide language services to non-native English members, which I think is possible by building partnerships with translation companies or English editing companies. Thank you very much. Next, please.
Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, so while Adriana's focus is more towards supporting local structures, local practices, knowledge production, Naomi will be focusing more on addressing institutional barriers in a top-down way, and removal of barriers needs resources. And so Andrew is going to help us ensure that we put our resources to good use so that EC members are equipped to bring about the change that we aspire to in alignment with our community's needs and priorities. So over to Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'll basically, first, I just want to thank Aniruddha. I think what I'm saying here is also kind of repeating to some extent what he said. And so I'm hoping to continue to work on this openness and transparency of our budget so that the SIGCHI community knows where to look to understand how money is spent, and then also knows where they can provide input and feedback so that they can have an impact on how money is spent. We heard about, resources and where the resources are needed. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody else on the EC to make sure the allocation is there so we can accomplish things that we're aiming to accomplish. And then again, something that Aniruddha mentioned as well, these are changing times. So in part, how do we maintain financial health? How do we move forward with our finances? That's something that I want to be paying close attention to. So looking forward to the next 3 years.
Thank you, Andrew. And often we find that we make change, but it doesn't reach our community, maybe because we don't target the right channels or we don't know fully who we should be targeting. Fortunately, we have a VP membership and communication who cares deeply about community. So over to Tammy.
Hello, everybody. So as you can see, my real name is Tamara, but I go by Tammy. I am an associate professor at the University of Maryland, and I am honored to be elected as the VP of Membership and Communications. And like Naomi, I am very new to this position, so my goals may seem a bit vague as well. I would ask for people to bear with me as I learn the ropes of this complicated system. And so for my goals for my term would be to strengthen the communication channels that we've already heard a lot about, from Helena to Regina, and everyone in between has talked about all of the sort of the complex structure of our communication system and how we're trying to really reach the people that are engaged with CHI and find those people, the outliers who may not be receiving communication. So I really want to work to strengthen the communication outgoing, but also the communication within the committee. So figuring out how to help people to make blog posts and sort of communicate out from the executive committee to the broader CHI community. So it'll be strengthening those communication channels that have already been worked so hard to be established, but are changing so because of the dynamics of the times. And then also I'll be looking to really see how we can develop new ways to reach diverse pockets of the community. So working with, like Naomi said, working with Naomi, working with the VP of Ops and the Ops teams, but also working with the accessibility teams and the diversity, equity, and inclusion teams to figure out how can we identify these pockets of people who we're not yet reaching with our communications. And then once we realize that, then I love to do participatory design and come up with creative new ideas. So it'll be thinking about how can we innovate around community engagement to bring people in and really get them engaged. So that will be, that's my goals. I look forward to working with everyone and learning the ropes.
Thank you, Tammy. Next, please. So setting an example for how we can engage community, we have our accessibility team. This is led by Stacey Brannan, but a lot of work has gone in thanks to Soraya as well, as we heard. Stacey is not here, but this team will be focusing on the following goals. So increasing accessibility, responsiveness, and transparency for members, connecting volunteers to accessibility resources, tracking global accessibility barriers and opportunities for the EC, and advocating for lasting accessibility change within SIGCHI and the ACM. And if you'd like to read more about these, Stacey and Soraya just published a post on our blog going into these in much more detail. So this is the foundation that they've set up, and we're really, really grateful because there's so much to learn, not just in terms of accessibility, but also all of the other initiatives that we're thinking about. Back to Shawen.
Okay, thank you. I'm stepping in for Helena. As you probably remember, she alluded to this earlier. She's now on the special new ACM committee that look at disclosure policy implementation. So she will be our conduit to ACM that specifically addresses some of the and to materialize and concretize the implementation of the violation database. The volunteer handbook is a work in progress. She will be involving the community to workshop different implementation to make sure that this address a lot of different concerns. And at the end of the day, the goal is to honor and acknowledge volunteer work. And lastly, she will also be identifying guidelines for data access and collection. Next. In my new role as the Executive Vice President of SIGCHI EC, I will work closely with Neha, my SIGCHI EC colleagues, ACM, and the broader community to expand the reach of SIGCHI research and practice. I want to give a special shout out to Cliff and Julie, my predecessor, for the strong foundations they have put in place. Specifically, I will be focusing on bolstering leadership and mentoring pipeline and widen opportunities to participate in them. I'd like to also develop mechanism to translate and disseminate SIGCHI scientific contributions and cultivate better transdisciplinary connections. And finally, we will also create infrastructure to help ensure that all voices are heard and taken seriously, with an emphasis on those that have been historically marginalized, so as to systematize processes that will establish equity and inclusivity as the norm. Next.
I was muted. So that's everyone else on our new EC. As president, I see my role as enabling everyone on our team to define and achieve their goals on the EC for SIGCHI. A visioning exercise for our entire EC is going to have to wait until we have an entire EC, but until then, I'd like to share with you the commitments that we have in common. So to put this together, I looked through our 200-word statements that we had put together for the elections, elicited more hopes and dreams from our new members, and this is where I landed. So 1, facilitating safe, accessible, inclusive, sustainable, equitable options for participating across venues. Next. Bridging the local and global, we've heard about that quite a bit today. Connecting research, education, design, and practice, so through partnerships. Next, enabling open, transparent functioning. Hopefully this meeting is the first of many, across conferences, across SIGCHI venues, across ACM. Next, making visible the work of volunteers. We cannot stress this enough, generating opportunities for leadership, mentorship, and networking. And finally, supporting diverse interdisciplinary knowledge production. And these are high-level goals. In doing these, there are 7 commitments we aim to uphold. So next. First, of pluralism, so being accepting of difference and different types of difference in cultures and languages, research methodologies, disciplinary homes, and so on. Next, equity throughout, towards removing barriers to participation and contribution across these differences. Third, setting up the infrastructures that we need. These include programs like the Gary Marsden Travel Awards, but also committees like our most recently added Accessibility Committee, all of the work that operations has been doing, really supporting these and making them stronger. Fourth, educating the EC and the community through regular channels of engagement and communication so that we are on the same page and we stay on the same page. Next, responsibility, which is also the ability to respond to changes around us with leadership. Next, partnership. So building bridges constantly. This is work that we've already begun in good measure. And finally, no surprise, community. We're committed to engaging our community throughout in all our undertakings, inviting continual feedback and support from all of us here. So next, where does that lead us? Our first and most important task has been to standardize open calls for team formation. And even as we do this, we recognize that open calls are not always fully open because the knowledge of what these roles might entail it may not be equally accessible to everybody, but we hope to keep improving in these regards. Our next priority, also focused on removing barriers to participation, is around offering a range of volunteering opportunities so that we're continually bringing in new energy, new perspective, new vision into community leadership. And this is also in line with what Helena mentioned, if you remember. And then uncovering new ways of engaging our community. So many of you may have been at our equity talks, which began in March this year, and they have been well attended. And that's been one way to engage community. We also started the SIGCHI Discord, where we hoped to engage community members in discussion on critical topics. And we'll continue to, for example, around the violations database. And we will keep working to come up with more ways of engaging, and Tammy has already spoken to that. So these are all kind of high level goals. How do they really translate into more concrete actions? Well, currently, so next please. We have open calls out for the roles that we absolutely must fill according to our bylaws. And these are the VP chapters, operations, conferences, publications, and awards. And the deadline is 23rd, midnight, anywhere on earth. So that's tomorrow. So please do consider applying. And we'll be hoping to fill these very soon. The next set of calls, so if you can just go to the next slide, has very much been informed by all the listening and learning that we've been doing on the EC. And a large part of that has come through the equity talks. And I would say not just discussions about equity, but really discussions around the big decisions that we have to make as a community. So our focus areas will, of course, include accessibility and equity. That goes without saying, but we also intend to broaden and deepen our undertakings by one, bringing in a sustainability committee to address related challenges across conferences within the EC, as well as virtual and hybrid forms of functioning. And that's a call that's going to be out in the next few weeks. And this is really building on the equity talk that the accessibility team, sustainability team did. So you'll see that in a blog post very soon. Next, adding in an AC for community support who can help focus, previous slide. I was just going down the list. So adding in an AC for community support who can you can see that it is coming to a close. So that is a good thing, but I'll just finish going through this list. So adding in an AC or community support who can help focus on creatively and effectively tailoring our funding mechanisms to community needs. An AC for partnerships who can hopefully help address the barriers to participation in our venues that are experienced by practitioners, designers, researchers from other communities, from other cultures. And an EC for outreach who would support continual knowledge transfer across conferences, whether this is about our equity, diversity, and inclusion programs or our community support initiatives. And then an EC for policy, and this has come up more recently, and you heard that also in what Helena and Casey shared, because we've heard time and time again how our policies tend not to be people first and are often not super legible, easy to understand or follow, and that's something we want to fix. An AC for futures will focus on leadership and mentorship and how we're supporting and nurturing our student and early career members who are the future of SIGCHI. And so building on the work that Monica presented. And finally, we intend to keep room for members of the community to tell us what additional focus areas they might want us to consider by naming their AC. So that's going to be an open text box for you to kind of tell us what you would like to see more of that we haven't yet thought about. And this might be something that we discuss, we gather knowledge around, and then we plan ahead for. So that's what our next 2.5 months are going to look like. And we really hope that you'll assist and support us in achieving these milestones. And once our team is ready and we've completed our visioning exercise, then we will look forward to reporting back. Next slide. Until then, let's stay in touch. And I don't know if we have a whole lot of time for Q&A, but Casey, I'm giving it back to you.
So I'm actually not sure we have any time for, for Q&A. I dropped the email for the SIGCHI EC also in the chat if people have questions. And I believe there's also a Ask the EC channel on the Discord because it is exactly on the hour now. So I guess we don't actually have any time for questions because of all of this great information, but I really hope that people will continue to stay in touch.
Thank you so much, everybody. And yes, we absolutely did go over time, but I think it was actually really wonderful to hear everyone sort of take their time to talk about what they've been doing. Yes, Melissa said that it's been merged into #helpdesk. Yes, that's a new channel on the Discord. So, yep. I think that we're done. We can hang out for a few minutes if you'd like to stay back and ask questions, but we're going to be around and you'll be seeing us more. So there will be more opportunities. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.